Leon Edwards delivered this stunning head kick knockout to defeat Kamaru Usman, and in this video, we're gonna do a little bit of a fight science lesson and talk about the physiology of what's happening here and what Usman was displaying on the mat afterwards. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and on this channel, my goal is to teach you about medicine and science by relating it to what you see with your favorite athletes and sporting events. In this video, we're gonna cover a few things about this knockout. First of all, why this kick was so devastating and what's going on here when that kick is delivered to result in that concussion. We'll talk about why the body goes from being flaccid and sort of limp to then looking like it's almost rigid and sort of posturing. And then finally address why it looked like we saw Usman's right toe sort of twitching and flickering while he appeared to be unconscious. A concussion occurs when there's a transfer of force and energy from outside of the brain into the cells of the brain that result in this cascade of events that lead to what we see with the unconsciousness or the subsequent symptoms or certain posturing activities like we partly saw here with Usman. The brain is basically floating in the cerebral spinal fluid, and so it's cushioned, but it also has this ability to move a little bit within our skull. Whenever this kick comes in here from Edwards, the initial impact is going to first cause this jarring of Usman's entire head, of his skull, causing this bit of rotational kind of force to be delivered in that ultimately is then going to kick in and transfer to the brain as his head sort of shifts into a standard position. Our skull is there to protect the brain and help to absorb and prevent some of that force from going directly into the brain, but it's also important that our muscles are activated around the neck and around the skull to help, again, basically absorb some of that energy, some of that impact to prevent it from being transferred into the brain. And so part of what makes this knockout so bad for Usman is that he wasn't expecting it, right? He didn't see it coming. He was sort of ducking down into it. And so his muscles weren't able to adequately fire and protect themselves to basically activate and absorb some of that impact. And so there was no muscle support there. All of that head kick energy was basically getting directly transferred into the brain. Sometimes when we talk about fighters having stronger chins, part of it is because they're just able to absorb that energy from those punches, from those kicks, through activation of things like the muscles to prevent it from getting into the brain. Next, we'll talk about why Usman appeared to have this sort of rigid, kind of muscles frozen in place posture. But first, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video. Today's video is sponsored by a longtime supporter of the channel and a product that I use every day, Element. Element is a zero sugar electrolyte drink mix that features all the electrolytes you need without any of the extra junk that your body doesn't. Proper electrolyte levels are fundamental to a number of your body's functions, and whenever they become deficient, you can suffer from a number of side effects like muscle cramps or fatigue. It's important that you supplement these electrolytes in the correct amounts and in a healthy way. Element features a science-backed electrolyte formula with 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. And perhaps the best part is it doesn't have any artificial sweeteners, sugar, or extra fillers or junk that your body doesn't need. Right now, Element is offering my viewers a free sample pack with any Element order. That's 8 individual serving packets with any Element purchase. My personal favorite is the raspberry, but this is a great way to try all of the different flavors or even share some Element with a salty friend. Get yours today at drinkelement.com/BrianMD. This deal is only available through my link, so go to drinklmnt.com/BrianMD to get yours today. Thank you again to Element for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back to our learning. When people first lose consciousness after a concussion, their body goes limp because their brain cells aren't firing and everything just becomes limp and flaccid. But then what we'll sometimes see with more severe head injuries is the reverse, where we actually get activation of those nerve cells, which results in sort of these posturing positions or firing of the muscles. That's what is happening here with Usman when he's on the canvas. You can see how his left leg is still essentially rigid. His right arm is in sort of this extended position outward, like he's appearing to kind of go into this, what we call fencing response. And so even though you have that initial unconscious period where your body just goes limp when you fall to the ground, that can then be followed by this activation of those cells in your brain that result in this kind of rigid posturing appearance. And there's some thought that this might be reactivation of sort of some more primitive reflexes. Of course, a lot of people remember the fencing response with like Ben Askren. And so sometimes these pathways can get reactivated in the brain that in part are there to help sort of protect yourself involuntarily or defend yourself by making your muscles rigid and sort of straightening out your arms. So even though Usman is unconscious here, his brain is involuntarily discharging those neurons, which result in firing of those muscles and contracting of the muscles to give this rigid posture. And that feeds in a little bit to what we saw. If you noticed, his right toes almost appear to be twitching a little bit here when he was on the mat. Again, that's because of this increased electrical activity from the brain firing after that initial period of flaccidity or unconsciousness. A severe enough concussion can cause seizures, and what we're seeing here with Usman's right foot basically beating back and forth as he's on the mat is on that spectrum of involuntary electrical activity, causing that abnormal repetitive movement from the concussion. As all that abnormal electrical discharge quiets down, as the brain consciousness starts to return, we of course become more alert. But because what subsequently happens in a concussion is this sort of metabolic response where you get all these abnormal chemicals that sort of flood into the brain as a result of that trauma, you're left feeling very altered. You're left feeling groggy. You're left feeling like how Usman looked here, with that persistent level of confusion, despite being conscious and being alert. Thankfully, Usman hasn't had too many episodes like this in his career, but with each subsequent brain injury, of course, we get more concerned, because remember, we call it a concussion in sports, but it truly is a form of a traumatic brain injury. I wish Usman the best in his recovery, and hopefully he's able to get back there in the octagon doing what he loves here as quickly as possible. But that's it for the video. I hope it was interesting to learn a little bit about the sequence of head injuries and concussions like we saw with Usman. Let me know, as always, any questions or comments down below. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.